So this says use the slope-intercept form of a linear equation to sketch graphs. So the first one is y equals 4x minus 2. So what do we have here? Here I have just from looking at it, I know that my slope right here, which is the leading coefficient in front of x, my slope has to equal 4. And then I have my y-intercepts given to me by this part right here. My y-intercept is going to be the point. Remember, your x value is always 0, and then you use whatever that constant is. In this case, it's -2. So how would I plot this graph? I would start at the point 0, -2. So that's straight down to, I'm going to go ahead and label it 0, -2. Now I'm going to look at my slope. My slope is 4, but how I want to think of that is 4 over 1. This gives me rise over run. When you have a positive number in the top number is the rise, so that tells you whether you go up or down. If it's positive, you go up. If it's negative, you go down. The bottom number is the run, so that's left or right. If it's positive, you go right, and if it's negative, you go left. So because it's a positive 4, I go up 4, and because it's a positive 1, I go right 1. So I'm going to go from my point, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to go right 1. I'm going to place a dot right there. I'm going to label it. This is the point 1, 2. That is how I find another point on the graph. Anytime you're graphing a line, you need to label a minimum of 2 points. If you're graphing anything other than a line, you need to label at least 3 points. So let me teach you another trick though. Notice if I see 4 over 1, I hope you agree that's the same thing as -4 over -1. A negative over a negative is positive. So why did I do that? Because this gives me a different direction to go. So instead of up 4, right 1, this now tells me that I go down 4, left 1. So I'm going to start back at my original point. I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just past the graph. That's okay. And left 1. So I could plot a point where that would be roughly, would be right about there. That would be the point -1, -6. And I could do the exact same thing from the point 1, 2, except I could use the positive version, again going up 1, 2, 3, 4, and right 1. And plot another point. Again, these aren't necessary. I only needed 2 points. But I want to try to be really accurate here for you guys when you're seeing me graph my first line. Okay? So what am I looking for when you guys are graphing lines? Well, first of all, we need to connect it. Connect the dots, because this is a line. Do your best. You don't have to use a ruler or anything like that, but do your best to make it look like a line. Really hard for me because I'm using an iPad with an Apple Pencil right now. So please excuse the straightness of my lines, but that's what the line would look like. What am I looking for when you guys graph things? Well, the first thing is you need to label at least 2 points anytime you graph a line, 3 points anytime you graph anything else. When I say label, I'm saying actually put the 0, -2 or the 1, 2 with the parentheses. That's what labeling points are. Other things that I'm looking for. You need to be accurate within the entire window. Almost always I'll have you graph from -5 to 5 and -5 to 5. -5 to 5 on the x-axis, -5 to 5 on the y-axis. So this is almost always the window that I have you graph on. It's just a tiny, tiny, tiny window, but I need you to be accurate, completely accurate in that window. In other words, you can't do something like this. You can't just draw the line through those 2 points and put arrows on the bottom of them. You can't just do something like this right here. Okay? It needs to go the entire way, all the way to the edge of the window, and it has to be accurate all the way to the edge of the window. So make sure that your graph touches the edges of the graph, or the edges of the window that we've provided, and that you've labeled at least 2 points. That's what I'm looking for when you do this. All right, let's do the next one. This is y equals 2. How do I graph the graph of y equals 2? Well, y equals 2, if you remember, this is a horizontal line, because my y value never changes. Think about it. This is the value of y equals 2 right here. That's the value of y equals 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to graph a line from left to right. And if you notice, you take any point on this line, any point whatsoever on this line, your y value is 2. That's how we know we have the graph of y equals 2. Another thing that I didn't do on the previous one that I probably should have is you should always label your graphs as well. So let me come in here, label this graph, go back. This was y equals 4x minus 2. Okay? So what's the only thing I've done wrong here? Well, I've drawn it. I've touched the side windows. But what I did not do is label at least 2 points. Now we can label any points that we want here, so I'm just going to draw a random dot on here. This would be the point -2, 2. I can literally pick anything. I love picking intercepts. Those are always good points to label, so there's the point 0, 2. I've labeled at least 2 points. I've touched the edge of the graph. I've labeled the graph. I've now earned full credit. Let's move on. It says find the slope of the line passing through 2 points. It says here's 2 points. Remember that your slope is rise over run. They are going to use what we talked about earlier. Here you have the delta y. Again, that's just the change in y. That's the y2 minus y1. You have your delta x, which is the change in the x, which is x2 minus x1. No, it does not matter which point you use as the first point and which point you use as the second point. But this is where you're going to remember the formula. Hopefully you remember this. Is m, the slope of a line, is the change in y over the change in x, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It doesn't matter which one you choose as your first point, which one you choose as your second point. So continue on to do some examples using the slope formula.